It's really good to be here with you today, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you, but also to be here to listen and to contribute throughout the day. And there are three particular reasons that I'm very pleased to be here today. The first of which is the very positive relationship that I and my organisation, Skills for Care, have with your CEO, Bridget, and also with your chairman, who I can't see now, but is somewhere around, Mike, or he's disappeared again. Can't keep track of him, can we, Bridget? Both very well respected, or he's there, well respected advocates for the home care sector. Bridget and I, as you would expect, meet fairly regularly, and we discuss what Skills for Care can do to support your sector. And as you would expect, Bridget does not hold back in telling me what your sector needs. But that is the right approach, and it's one that I respect and one that I welcome. And that's why we always consult with UKHCA and domiciliary care employers when we're developing our resources, and particularly our standards and qualifications, because we understand that whilst we need standards and qualifications across the sector, there are different challenges and different pressures depending on who you are providing support and care to and how you are doing that. I'm also really pleased that Colin Angel, your Director of Policy and Campaigns, represents you on Skills for Care's Workforce Development Subcommittee. And again, it will come as no surprise to you to hear that Colin always takes every opportunity to put your case forward in a very robust manner, and we welcome that. And Colin has also attended and supported us during recent meetings to look at the Cavendish review, during the actual review itself, and then since the publication of the report and the recommendations. And again, he has been absolutely crystal clear about what can and cannot work for your sector. We're also very pleased that your organisation has a place on the Skills for Care board, which until very recently has been taken up by John Strangwich, who we're very grateful to. And he was at our most recent board seminar, which was last week, I think, or maybe the week before, where the board had a very lively debate about how to make sure that any of the intended solutions coming out of the Department of Health's response to both Francis and Cavendish are fit for purpose for our sector. Because we talk a lot about, well, people talk about health and social care. I try and turn that round and talk about social care and health. You might think that's a small moot point. I think it's very important, particularly thinking about some of the conversations that have just happened around prevention. Because if we get the social care right and the right resources in for social care, we can often prevent the need for perhaps more expensive and sometimes intrusive health interventions. So this means that what we need from these responses is not just for the social care sector, but also importantly for the domiciliary care sector. And from day one of the Cavendish review and the work that we've been involved with many colleagues since the recommendations have been reported, we have been arguing and continue to argue that the common induction standards, recently refreshed in partnership with employers across our sector, should be used as the basis of the care certificate that was announced in the DH response. Our view has always been that the focus should be concentrating on those employers who do not adequately induct their staff, rather than the majority of responsible employers, like those represented here today, who do. One of my directors, Andy Tilden, who is leading for us on the work in responding to the Cavendish review, I know has greatly appreciated UKHCA's very pertinent and well-argued contributions. And he's asked me to say to you that he would also welcome the opportunity to discuss and work with you, obviously through your association as we are doing, but any of you who are interested in being involved individually, to ensure that the solutions that we do come up with are fit for purpose for this vital part of the sector. I can assure you that, like the speakers before me, I'm under no illusions about the issues facing your sector, and also assure you that they are at the heart of our thinking at every level within Skills for Care. And this is particularly important for us as we have to create a qualifications framework that reflects what's happening in the real world. The second reason that I'm really pleased to be able to be here and speaking to you today is because I'm always impressed by UKHCA's measured and intelligent response to the often controversial and emotive issues impacting on home care. And the third is that as the Chief Executive Officer of the Workforce Development Organisation and the Sector Skills Council in England, I must and want always to be available to speak to you, and particularly through your conference. If not for any other reason than that our national minimum data set for social care tells us that the 410,000 or so workers that you employ make up around a quarter of our sector's total workforce. And for those of you who are on Twitter, please make sure that you follow our news stream about the NMDS-SC, providing regular updates about what the data is telling us. And that's at SFC_NMDS_SC. And if you didn't get that quickly enough, come and see me at the break and I'll tell you. Now, when I was a provider, a chief executive of a major provider in the north of England, a significant part of that business was providing domiciliary care. So it's fair to say that until fairly recently, I wrestled day in and day out with many of the problems that you face every day. But one of the things that I suppose gave me confidence and assurance was that I knew our well-trained and highly motivated domiciliary care teams were out there making a real difference to the lives of people who were utilising our services. And not only that, but they were providing, like you do, much-needed peace of mind for those families and carers as well. All those headaches and anxieties offset by the work and compassion shown by that team. The debates around zero-hour contracts or commissioning for 15-minute visits will, I'm sure, continue throughout the day. And I just want to promote something to you now as providers, which I'm not saying is a panacea, but I do think it's a good start. And that's a product that was produced through the National Market Development Forum, which is part of the Think Local Act Personal Partnership. And it's a document called Stronger Partnerships for Better Outcomes. And this was a co-produced piece of work, and I mean by that it was produced by commissioners, by people providing services, by people who need care and support, and by carers. And it looks at co-produced commissioning. How do we harness the skills, knowledge, experience, and recognise the constraints of providers, of people who need care and support, and carers and commissioners at a local level? Have a look at it, ask your local commissioners if they're using it, and if they're not, ask them perhaps if you could make a start. And I'm also pleased to be able to say to you that we have had some early conversations with Sandy and colleagues, and we will be involved in the work that's been referred to in developing standards for excellence in commissioning, because we must remember that commissioners are also part of our workforce, and we need to ensure that they have the skills that they need to be able to do what you're all asking for. What I would say is that the first national debates around these issues have shone a spotlight on the home care industry. And it's perhaps reminded the general public and others in positions of policy-making power that the person they see going into their elderly or disabled neighbour's home every day is a home care worker. It's a reminder that in our often fragmented society, that the home care worker might be the only person going into that person's home. And I was struck recently by what one older woman said about the worker who visits her morning and night. I really feel she brings the world to me. Support comes in many different ways, and that simple sentiment, I think, reminds us all of that. So our job as a sector, and more specifically, our role as the Workforce Development Organisation, is to link that bit of common humanity to the skills and knowledge needed to be the best home care worker possible. And if the biggest cost to your business is your staff, because we're a people business, so we need lots of them, and at the same time they're the public face of your company, then it has to make sense to continue to invest in them. Now, as I've said, I am not blissfully unaware or naive about the pressures on home care providers. I'm constantly reminded of the realities of day-to-day survival, because our vice chair at Skills for Care, Helen Wilcox, is of course a home care provider. Helen runs a domiciliary care business in the Midlands, and I'm sure is known to many of you. And she is a very forthright voice for the home care sector. And like the majority of people here today, Helen recognises that the companies who will weather the storm are those who invest in their people. And that's one of the reasons why we've been working with the Department of Health to make sure as many employers as possible access the Workforce Development Fund, and particularly employers in your sector. If we want learning and development to have an impact, then this fund is a way of supporting hard-pressed employers to access support in ensuring your workers can achieve the qualifications they want and we need. So if you have accessed that funding, well, that's good news. But if you haven't, my question to you is, why not? One of the great strengths of the Workforce Development Fund is the employer-led partnerships, which UKHCA have been involved with from day one. And I know that our workforce development team has really appreciated the collaborative approach you've always taken, which has meant the money has been delivered efficiently to your members to make good use of. And it's through that collaborative approach that we've recently revised the partnership standards that are now used by all of the partnerships. And our team wanted me to acknowledge to you that when changes do need to be made, UKHCA has not only always been quick to make sure that home care's voice was heard, but has also always offered workable solutions. So if you're not drawing down this funding, then please talk to one of the UKHCA team, or come and see me, or get in touch with our workforce development team. Now, I also wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the social care commitment, which has been launched recently. I haven't got any slides, but I do have a little flyer. And if you haven't seen this, or you haven't seen the website, or you're not following them on Twitter, please do at least one of those. We have got a stand here today, and I'm sure those flyers will be on there. Now, we recognise that in difficult times, we cannot ask employers to support learning and development if we're not offering resources to support that commitment to excellence. So the social care commitment works in two ways. The first is that employers voluntarily sign up to 7 guiding principles that have been created by the sector for the sector. And at that point, you can also encourage your workers to sign up. So this is not some high-level edict being handed down, but these are carefully crafted statements that reflect what employers say they need to think about from the point when you're considering employing someone right through to the fulfilment of their career. Now, you'll be delighted to know I'm not going to go through all 7 statements now, but they do offer a framework that supports learning and development and the creation of positive working cultures that includes employers, families and, crucially, people who need care and support that take up your services. And where I think this is really useful to your sector is because the initial commitment is backed up by a wide range of online resources that you can use and, as importantly, your workers can use too. So once an employer is signed up, an organisational development plan will be prepared for you to download. And then each statement is backed by a series of practical tasks that you can complete to put them in practice, backed up by online resources. Means that you and your team can access those resources at base before you go out to see people that you provide care and support to. And you can access them remotely if you're meeting your teams away from your main base. And your workers, if you have them, not the workers, but if you have resources such as tablets or smartphones, then they can also access all of this on those. And John mentioned NHS Choices earlier, and I know you have a workshop on that later on this afternoon. So from the new year, the general public will be able to log on to that website and see which employers have made the commitment. So it's really important that when people are making those difficult choices about home care they want for themselves or their loved ones, they have access to the best information possible. And in a competitive marketplace, of course, if an organisation has made that commitment, that may well influence the companies that people choose to do business with. I am not, of course, pretending that the social care commitment is a panacea for all the challenges we face, but it is a useful addition to how we think about what we do and how the public can access useful information when they're making those difficult choices about care and support. So I'm not going to waste this opportunity to use a platform like this to ask you to sign up to the social care commitment. We have already had a good response, but we want every employer signed up and integrating and embedding this into their work. So I want to finish by thanking you all for your continued commitment to learning and development, despite all the pressures. I'm lucky enough in my job to see for myself what good care looks like. We all know about what happens when it goes wrong and how horrendous that is, and that we all want to strive to stop that ever happening again. And we see the national and local papers telling stories about workers stealing from a vulnerable adult or not doing their job properly or worse. But we rarely hear about the thousands of hours of quality care provided by home care providers like you that enrich and transform lives. We rarely hear from or about the workers who always go the extra mile to make sure the people they work with receive quality care and support. Quality home care might not be a headline-grabbing story, but without it, our communities would be a less dignified and safe place for millions of people who rely on your commitment to excellence. And that's one reason why we will run our annual accolades, because it's an opportunity to recognise and celebrate the excellence that is out there the majority of the time. And when I sit at those awards and see quality home care providers being celebrated, it reminds me we must be doing something right. So I think the next step is to make sure that the public know that too. And with such a solid base in home care, I'm confident that together we can make that happen. Thank you.